My aunt smirked as she banished me to the moldy basement room, mocking my failures in front of the whole family. She didn't know I'd bought the entire resort months ago, so I waited for dinner to drop the deed and evict her. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of my modest, 5-year-old sedan as I pulled up the winding driveway of the Silver Lake Lodge. The property was breathtaking, nestled deep in the mountains with the sun glinting off the pristine water of the lake below. It was the kind of place that smelled of pine needles, old money, and, specifically for this weekend, the suffocating perfume of my Aunt Carol. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My knuckles were white, the tension radiating up my forearms and settling into a hard knot at the base of my neck. I wasn't physically ill, not in the traditional sense, but the sheer exhaustion that had settled into my bones over the last 6 months of renovations and portfolio management had left me fragile. I was running on caffeine and the desperate hope that this family reunion would be different. That maybe, just maybe, since I had turned 38 and established a quiet, stable life for myself, the ridicule would stop. But as I parked the car in the overflow lot, far away from the entrance where the valet was currently parking Cousin Preston's lease sports car, I felt that familiar pit in my stomach. I stepped out of the car, stretching my stiff back. I smoothed down my simple linen dress. It was high quality, tailored, and expensive, but it didn't scream wealth. That was my style. Understated. It was a stark contrast to the clan I was about to face. I walked into the grand lobby, the heavy timber doors swinging open to reveal the rustic luxury I knew intimately. I knew that the chandelier above was made of genuine elk antlers. I knew the stone fireplace was recently repointed because I had signed the invoice for the masonry work 3 weeks ago. I knew the front desk manager, Mr. Henderson, had a grandkid on the way and was worried about his pension plan. I knew all of this because I owned the place. But nobody here knew that. To them, I was just Abigail. Poor, single, unambitious Abigail who worked in hotel management, a vague term I used to hide my investment firm, and drove a Honda. Well, look who finally decided to show up. The voice cut through the ambient jazz music of the lobby like a serrated knife. I turned to see Aunt Carol holding court on one of the leather Chesterfield sofas. She was 62, though she fought tooth and nail to look 45 via aggressive cosmetic procedures and a wardrobe that cost more than my first apartment. Next to her sat Cousin Preston, 30 years old, scrolling on his phone, looking bored and expensive. And in the corner, looking like she wanted to disappear into the upholstery, was Cousin Mary. "Hello, Aunt Carol," I said, forcing a polite smile. Traffic was a bit heavy coming up the pass. "Excuses, always excuses with you, Abigail," Carol sighed, taking a sip of what looked like a mimosa, despite it being 3 in the afternoon. She stood up, her jewelry clanking. "We've all been here for hours. Preston was just telling us about his new venture. Crypto mining, was it, darling?" Preston didn't even look up. "It's complicated, Mom. You wouldn't get it, but it's big." "See?" Carol beamed, turning her predatory gaze back to me. "Big things. Meanwhile, I assume you're still working at that little motel chain." "I work in hospitality, yes," I said quietly. I walked toward the check-in desk. Mr. Henderson was standing there. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me. He stiffened, his professional mask slipping for just a fraction of a second into a look of deference. I gave him a nearly imperceptible shake of my head. "Not yet." "Checking in for the Vance family reunion," I said to him, keeping my voice formal. "Abigail Vance." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Yes, Ms. Vance, welcome, we have you listed." Actually, Aunt Carol's voice boomed as she marched over, inserting herself between me and the desk. She slapped her hand onto the marble countertop. "I handled the room assignments, didn't I, Mr. Henderson, as the organizer of this event?" "You did, ma'am," Mr. Henderson said, his eyes darting nervously to me. Right, Carol said, reaching into her oversized designer tote. She pulled out a crumpled printed spreadsheet. Preston is in the lakeside suite, obviously. He needs the space for his business calls. Mary is in the garden view room because she brought the kids. I, of course, took the master chalet. She paused, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. She looked at me, her eyes scanning me up and down with disdain. And that leaves Abigail. I'm happy with a standard room, Aunt Carol, I said, trying to de-escalate the situation before it started. Really, anything is fine. Oh, we didn't book you a standard room, dear, Carol laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Budget cuts, you know how it is. The family pot only stretches so far, and since you didn't contribute anything significant to the reunion fund. I had offered to pay. She had rejected my check, claiming she didn't want to embarrass me by taking my rent money. So, Carol continued, looking at Mr. Henderson, give her the key to room B4. Mr. Henderson froze. Ma'am, room B4 it's technically a service quarter. It hasn't been renovated yet. It's currently listed as do not occupy in our system due to the moisture issues. It's a room with a bed, isn't it? Carol snapped. She's family. She won't mind roughing it. It's not like she's used to luxury, are you, Abigail? It'll probably remind you of that basement apartment you lived in during college. Preston snickered from the couch. Yeah, Abby, think of it as nostalgic. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He was pale, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, waiting for my command. He could end this right now. He could tell her that I owned the suite she was sleeping in. He could tell her that I signed his paycheck. But if I did that now, she would spin it. She would play the victim. She would say I was flaunting my money, that I was being cruel to my elders. I needed her to dig the hole deeper. I needed everyone to see exactly who she was before I pulled the ladder up. It's fine, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I'll take room B4. Are you sure, MS? Ms. Vance? Henderson asked, his voice thick with apology. I'm sure, I said. Just give me the key. Carol snatched the key card from the desk before Henderson could hand it to me. She dropped it into my palm with a smirk. Don't lose it, she said, and try to shower before dinner. You look like you've been working. The betrayal wasn't that she put me in a bad room. It was the absolute glee she took in doing it. It was worse than the diagnosis of the mold in that basement. It was the rot in her heart. The descent into the lower level of the lodge was like walking into a different climatic zone. The upper floors were air-conditioned, scented with cedar and sage, and bathed in warm, golden light. But as I took the service stairs down past the laundry facilities, the air grew heavy and damp. Room B4 was located at the end of a long, concrete hallway that smelled faintly of bleach and heavily of mildew. It was the room we used for seasonal staff overflow in emergencies or for storage during the off-season. It was on my list for a full gut renovation next month. I swiped the key card. The lock clicked sluggishly, the mechanism protesting the effort. I pushed the door open and was greeted by a wave of stale, humid air. The room was small. A single window, high up on the wall, looked out at ground level, offering a stunning view of the underside of a fern and the back tire of a maintenance truck. The carpet was a weary shade of brown that had seen better decades. The bed was a twin, saggy in the middle, covered with a thin, scratchy blanket. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. It groaned under my weight. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, immediately regretting it as the scent of damp drywall filled my nose. My first instinct was to cry. It was the physical manifestation of how they saw me, an afterthought, something to be tucked away in the dark while they enjoyed the view. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mary. I'm so sorry, Abby. I tried to tell her it wasn't right, but you know how she is. She said you wouldn't mind. Do you want to come sneak into my room? The kids are loud, but the couch is comfy. I smiled sadly. Mary was a teacher, overworked and underpaid, with a heart too big for this family. She was the only reason I still came to these things. "I'm fine, Mary. Don't worry about me. I'll see you at dinner," I typed back. I stood up and walked to the small bathroom. The faucet dripped with a rhythmic plink, plink, plink. I looked at myself in the mirror. The glass was desilvered at the edges. "You should be grateful," I whispered to my reflection, mimicking Aunt Carol's voice. I washed my face with cold water, the shock of it helping to clear the fog of humiliation. As I dried my face with the thin, rough towel provided, my eyes drifted to the maintenance checklist taped to the back of the bathroom door. It was an old sheet, dated 6 months ago. At the bottom, in red ink, were the words, "Awaiting approval from new ownership for demolition." I reached out and traced the words with my finger. "They forgot one crucial thing," I murmured to the empty, smelly room. "They forgot to check who signed the approval." I wasn't just the poor niece anymore. I was the executioner, and they had just handed me the axe. I changed into my dinner clothes, a crisp navy jumpsuit that looked professional yet casual. I spent extra time on my hair and makeup. If I was going to sleep in the dungeon, I was going to look like the queen of the castle while doing it. I made my way upstairs, the transition from the dank basement to the opulent lobby jarring. I walked toward the main dining hall, where the welcome dinner was being held. As I approached the double doors, I heard laughter. Loud, raucous laughter. "And you should have seen her face." Aunt Carol's voice carried through the wood. "She just took the key, didn't even fight back. That girl has no spine. That's why she's still single at almost 40. "She's probably used to the smell," Preston chimed in, his mouth full of food. "Smells like her bank account, empty and dusty." The table erupted in laughter. I paused at the door, my hand hovering over the brass handle. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It had slowed to a cold, heavy thrum. I wasn't nervous. I was calculating. I checked my watch. It was 6:30 p.m. I had told Mr. Henderson to have the special paperwork ready by 7:00 p.m. I pushed the doors open and walked in. The laughter died down, replaced by a few awkward coughs. Mary looked at me with pity. Preston smirked. Aunt Carol didn't even blink. She just gestured vaguely to an empty chair at the far end of the table near the kitchen's swing doors. "You're late," Carol said. "We started without you. Try to catch up, but don't eat the lobster. We only ordered enough for the people who pitched in." I sat down in the wobbly chair. "That's fine, Aunt Carol. I'm not very hungry." I poured myself a glass of water, my eyes scanning the room. The staff were hovering near the walls, their faces tense. They knew. They were waiting for my signal. "So," I said, keeping my voice light, "tell me more about this crypto mining, Preston. It sounds volatile." Preston rolled his eyes. "You wouldn't understand the market dynamics, Abby. It's about leverage." "Leverage," I repeated, looking him dead in the eye. "Yes, leverage is very important. To understand why I was sitting in a basement room smelling of mildew while my aunt ate lobster on a terrace, you have to understand the history of the Vance family. Or rather, the history of how the Vance family broke. My father was Carol's younger brother. He was a dreamer, a carpenter, a man who worked with his hands and loved deeply. Carol was the business mind. She had worked in corporate HR for 40 years, climbing the ladder by stepping on fingers. She valued titles, labels, and perceived status above all else. When my parents died in a car accident 10 years ago, I was 28. I was devastated, lost, and financially unstable. I had turned to Aunt Carol for guidance, for family support. She had looked at my father's small estate, mostly tools and a heavily mortgaged house, and scoffed. She took charge of the funeral, made it all about her grief, and then promptly handed me a bill for the flowers. "Life isn't free, Abigail," she had told me at the graveside. "You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Don't expect handouts just because of a tragedy." I never asked her for a dime after that. I took my grief and channeled it into work. I started flipping small properties. I learned to tile, to plumb, to negotiate. I lived in construction zones, breathing dust and eating ramen, saving every penny. I moved from residential flips to boutique commercial spaces. And then, 2 years ago, I started buying failing historic hotels and bringing them back to life. I never told Carol. Why would I? Every time I saw her, she dismissed me. Still playing with hammers? She would ask. Still wearing those work boots? To her, I was a manual laborer, a failure who couldn't cut it in the corporate world. And then there was Preston, the golden child. Preston sat across from me now, wiping butter off his chin. He was 30, but he had the maturity of a teenager with a limitless credit card. He had launched 6 startups in 5 years, a t-shirt company, a drone delivery service, a specialized energy drink for gamers. All of them failed. All of them were funded by Aunt Carol's retirement savings and the second mortgage on her house. A fact I knew because I had run a credit check on her. When I considered buying her debt anonymously last year, I decided against it. It was too messy. So, Abigail, Preston said, leaning back and picking his teeth. Mom says you're still living in that apartment complex on 4th Street, the one near the highway. It was a lie. I had moved out of there 5 years ago. I now owned a penthouse downtown, but I kept my mailing address at a P.O. box to avoid prying eyes. It's convenient, I said simply. Convenient for your wallet, maybe, Preston chuckled. I'm looking at a loft in the city, exposed brick, industrial vibe. It's $3,000 a month, but you have to pay for quality, right? Absolutely, I said. Who is paying for it? The table went quiet. Preston's face reddened. I am, he snapped. My investments are paying off. He's doing very well, Carol interjected sharply, glaring at me. Unlike some people, Preston takes risks. He has vision he doesn't settle for. Mediocrity. She took a sip of wine and looked around the dining room. Speaking of mediocrity, she said, waving a hand at the room. This service is slow, and the linens are a bit threadbare, don't you think? I expected better for the price we're paying. Mary spoke up softly from her end of the table. I think it's lovely, Aunt Carol. The view is beautiful. You think everything is lovely, Mary. That's why you're a teacher. Carol dismissed her. You have low standards, but when you have refined taste, you notice these things. She beckoned a waiter over. It was a young man named David. I knew David. He was working double shifts to pay for his engineering degree. Ma'am, David asked politely. This wine, Carol said, pointing a manicured finger at her glass. It's corked, take it back. I opened the bottle fresh at the table, ma'am, David said gently. Are you arguing with me? Carol's voice rose. I know what bad wine tastes like. Take it away and bring me something that doesn't taste like vinegar, and be quick about it. David looked at me, his eyes wide. He was terrified. He knew who I was. He was looking to me for permission to either kick her out or apologize. I gave him a small nod. Wait. I'm so sorry, ma'am, David said, taking the glass. I'll fix it right away. Unbelievable, Carol huffed as he walked away. The help these days, no work ethic, just like... She trailed off, her eyes landing on me again. Just like me, I offered. If the shoe fits, dear, she smiled tightly. Maybe you should ask them for a job application while you're down in the basement. You'd fit right in with the staff. That was it, that was the line. She didn't just insult me, she insulted the people who worked hard to make this place run. She insulted the dignity of work itself. I looked at Cousin Mary. She was staring at her plate, looking like she wanted to cry. I looked at Preston, who was smirking at his mother's cruelty. The sadness I had felt earlier evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I wasn't going to just evict them. I was going to destroy the illusion they lived in. The dinner dragged on for another hour. I ate nothing. I drank only water. I sat and listened as Carol listed off her imaginary achievements and Preston bragged about money he didn't have. When the meal finally ended, Carol clapped her hands. All right, everyone, drinks on the terrace for the adults. Mary, you should probably go put the children to bed. Abigail, she paused, tapping her chin theatrically. I suppose you can join us, but do try not to bore everyone with your work stories. Actually, maybe you should go check on your room. Make sure the rats haven't carried off your suitcase." "I have a few things to take care of first," I said, standing up. "I'll join you later." "Suit yourself," Carol said, turning her back on me. I walked out of the dining hall, but I didn't go to the basement. I turned left, slipped through the employees' only door, and walked down the back corridor to the executive office. Mr. Henderson was waiting for me. The room was dimly lit, the large oak desk covered in paperwork. "Ms. Vance," he said, standing up immediately. I apologize for how she spoke to you. It took everything in me not to say something." "You did perfectly, Robert," I said, using his first name. "Thank you for holding the line." I walked around the desk and sat in the leather chair, my chair. It felt good to be sitting in a seat of power, even if no one outside this room knew it yet. "Do you have the documents?" I asked. "Right here," Henderson said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. I opened it. Inside was everything I had asked for. First, the booking details. Aunt Carol hadn't paid the deposit. She had put a card on file, a credit card that had been declined twice before she finally used a different one, which only authorized for the first night. She was planning to stiff the hotel or argue the bill down at the end based on complaints about the service. Second, the damage report. Preston had already accrued $400 in charges to the room. Room service, pay-per-view movies, and a noise complaint from the neighbors because he was blasting music. Third, and most importantly, the deed to the property confirming ownership by AV Holdings LLC, of which I was the sole signatory. "And the other matter?" I asked, looking up. Henderson nodded grimly. "I made a few calls to the other properties in the region, as you asked. Your aunt is blacklisted at the Pines and the Mountain View Inn. Same pattern. Abuse. E of staff, refusal to pay for substandard service, and disruptive behavior." "So she's a serial offender," I said, closing the folder. "It appears so," Henderson said. "She uses the family reunion as a way to vacation for free. She collects money from the family members. I assume she collected from Mary and the others." "She collected $500 a head," I said, my voice cold. "She told Mary it was for the group rate, but if she's not paying the bill." "Then she's pocketing the cash," Henderson finished. I felt a surge of rage. Stealing from me was one thing. Stealing from Mary, who was a single mother on a teacher's salary, was unforgivable. "Okay," I said, standing up and smoothing down my jumpsuit. "That's enough. I have everything I need." "What is the plan, Ms. Vance?" Henderson asked. "The plan is an early checkout," I said. "Robert, I need you to print the final bill for the master chalet and the lakeside suite. Calculate the full rack rate. No discounts. Add the damages. And print a refund receipt for Mary's room. I'm comping her stay." "Understood," Henderson said, typing furiously. "And one more thing," I said, walking to the door. "I need the security team on standby near the terrace in 10 minutes, just in case Preston decides to get energetic." "They'll be there," Henderson promised. I took the folder. It felt heavy in my hand, like a weapon. I walked back out into the hallway. I could hear the distant sounds of laughter from the terrace. They were out there, drinking my wine, enjoying my view, and spending Mary's money. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like the poor niece anymore. I looked like the owner. It was time to introduce them to the real Abigail Vance. The terrace was bathed in the soft, amber glow of string lights that crisscrossed overhead. A fire pit crackled in the center of the stone patio, sending sparks drifting up toward the twilight stars. It was a picture-perfect setting, a scene designed for relaxation, connection, and joy. It was completely wasted on the people currently occupying it. Aunt Carol was lounging on a cushioned wicker sofa, her feet up on the coffee table. She was holding a fresh glass of white wine, the third bottle, if my count was correct, and pontificating to a captive audience of distant cousins who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. Preston was leaning against the railing, smoking a cigar that smelled cheap despite the gold band wrapped around it, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. The conversation stopped the moment the glass door clicked shut behind me. I stood there for a moment, the heavy folder tucked under my arm, breathing in the cool mountain air. I needed to ground myself. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about excision. It was about cutting out the rot so the healthy parts of the family and my property could survive. "Oh, look," Preston drawled, exhaling a plume of acrid smoke. "The basement dweller returns. Did you find a rat friend to talk to, Abby?" Carol chuckled, swirling her wine. "Don't be mean, Preston. Maybe she just came up to bust the tables. We are finished with these appetizers, Abigail. If you want to be useful, you can take the plates back to the kitchen." I walked forward, my heels clicking rhythmically on the slate stones. I didn't stop until I was standing directly in front of the coffee table, blocking Carol's view of the fire. "I'm not here to clear the table, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice calm but carrying a weight that made the cousins sit up straighter. "I'm here to clear the air." Carol sighed, an exaggerated theatrical sound of pure exhaustion. "Oh God, here we go, the poor me speech. Why doesn't anyone respect me? Why do I have to sleep in the damp room? Save it, Abigail. It's boring. You are where you are in life because of your choices. If you had listened to me 10 years ago and taken that data entry job I found for you, maybe you'd be able to afford a better room." "It's interesting you talk about affordability," I said. I pulled the folder from under my arm and opened it. "Because according to the front desk, there seems to be a discrepancy with your billing." Carol froze, her eyes narrowed into slits. "Excuse me." "The front desk," I repeated. "They ran your card for the master chalet, and Preston's suite, and the incidentals." "I know they ran it," Carol snapped, sitting up. "I gave them my platinum card." "You gave them a card that was declined," I corrected her. "Twice. And then you gave them a debit card that only had enough funds to cover a $50 hold. You haven't paid for the rooms, Carol. You haven't paid for the dinner. You haven't even paid for that wine you're drinking." The silence on the terrace was absolute. The distant cousins exchanged horrified glances. Preston flicked his cigar ash over the railing, looking nervous. "How dare you?" Carol hissed, her face flushing a mottled red. "How dare you spy on my finances? That is a bank error. I have plenty of money. I will handle it with the manager in the morning. It is none of your business." "It became my business when you started lecturing me on financial responsibility while actively committing theft of services," I said. I pulled out the first document, the itemized bill Mr. Henderson had printed. I dropped it onto the coffee table, right next to her feet. "That is the current tally," I said. $4,300 just for today." Carol didn't look at the paper. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "Who do you think you are? You think because you spoke to some receptionist you have the right to humiliate me? I am the matriarch of this family. I organized this reunion." "Did you?" I asked. I turned my gaze to Mary, who was sitting in the corner, clutching a glass of water. "Mary, how much did you pay Aunt Carol for this weekend?" Mary looked terrified. She looked from Carol to me, her eyes wide. I transferred her $500 for me and the kids." "And you, Mark?" I looked at another cousin. "600, Mark mumbled, "for the couple's package." I did a quick mental calculation. There were 20 people here. She had collected roughly $10,000 from the family. "She collected 10 grand from you all," I said, turning back to Carol. "And she hasn't paid the resort a single dime. She's not the organizer. She's a middleman who's pocketing your cash and stiffing the hotel." "That is a lie," Carol screamed, standing up. She was trembling now. "I am holding that money in a separate account to pay the final bill. That is how event planning works, you ignorant little girl. You don't pay up front." "Actually," I said, pulling out the second document, the blacklist report from the other hotels. "That's not your pattern, is it? The Pines, the Mountain View Inn, the Lakefront Resort. You have a history, Carol. You book, you collect money from the family, you stay, and then at the end of the weekend, you manufacture a crisis. You complain about the food, the sheets, the noise. You threaten bad reviews. You bully the managers into comping the bill to get you to leave. And you walk away with the family's money in your pocket. Preston stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Hey, you watch your mouth. You can't talk to my mother like that. She's a respected member of the community. She's a grifter, Preston, I said, not backing down. And so are you. Preston laughed, but it was a hollow, nervous sound. Me, a grifter? I'm an entrepreneur. My crypto mining operation doesn't exist, I cut him off. I pulled another sheet from the folder. I did a little digging while I was in the damp room. Your business license was revoked last year for non-payment of taxes. Your office is a P.O. box. And the car you drove here? The license plate runs back to a rental agency in the city. It's a weekend rental, Preston. You don't own it. Preston's face went pale. He looked like a child whose hand had been caught in the cookie jar. You stalked me? That's illegal. I'll sue you. It's public record, I said dryly, and good luck paying a lawyer. Carol stepped in front of her son, her maternal instinct twisting into something ugly. Get out, she spat. Get out of my sight, Abigail. You are jealous. You are bitter because you have nothing, so you try to tear us down. You are ruining this family reunion. I'm not ruining it, I said, my voice rising slightly, finally letting some of the anger bleed through. I'm saving it. Look at Mary. I pointed at Mary, who was now quietly weeping. Mary works 2 jobs, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. She saved for months to bring her kids here. She trusted you, Carol, and you took her money she needs for rent, for groceries, and you used it to rent a sports car for Preston. You used it to buy yourself designer clothes. You stuck me in a moldy basement while you sat up here drinking wine bought with her money. Mary is fine, Carol yelled. She's happy to contribute to the family, unlike you. I'm not happy, Aunt Carol. Mary's voice was small, but it cut through the noise. We all turned to look at her. Mary stood up, wiping her eyes. I'm not happy, she repeated, stronger this time. I told you I couldn't afford the extra 100 you asked for last week, and you told me I was being selfish. You said if I didn't pay, I couldn't come. I had to borrow money from my sister. And now I find out you haven't even paid the hotel. Mary, darling, don't listen to her, Carol said, her voice switching instantly to a sickly sweet tone. Abigail is twisting things. It's complicated business finance. It's not complicated, I snapped. It's fraud. That's enough, Preston lunged forward, grabbing my arm. His grip was tight, painful. You need to leave, Abby, now, before I make you. Let go of me, I said, my voice drop. To a dangerous whisper. Or what? Preston sneered, leaning into my face. You'll go cry to the manager. He works for us, remember? We're the guests. The customer is always right. Preston, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I'm going to give you 3 seconds to remove your hand from my arm. If you don't, you are going to regret it for the rest of your life. 1, Preston mocked. 2. Mr. Vance, a deep voice boomed from the doorway. Preston flinched and let go. We all turned to see Mr. Henderson standing there. Behind him were 2 large men in security uniforms. They weren't the friendly concierge staff. These were the night security, ex-military guys I hired specifically for situations like this. Thank God, Carol threw her hands up. Mr. Henderson, finally, this woman, my niece, is harassing us. She is drunk and disorderly. I want her removed from the property immediately, and I expect a full refund for this terrible disturbance. She crossed her arms, a smug smile returning to her face. She thought she had won. She thought the system was built to protect people like her, people who yelled the loudest. Mr. Henderson didn't look at her. He walked past her, past Preston, and came to stand directly beside me. Are you all right, Ms. Vance? He asked me, his voice filled with genuine concern. I'm fine, Robert, I said, rubbing my arm where Preston had grabbed me. Just a little disappointed. Carol blinked. Ms. Vance, why are you calling her that? Her name is Abigail. She's nobody. Mr. Henderson, I said, ignoring Carol, please distribute the final documents. Henderson nodded. He reached into his own jacket and pulled out a stack of papers. He handed one to Mary, one to Mark, And then, with a stony expression, he placed a single, thick document on the table in front of Carol. "What is this?" Carol demanded. "That," I said, "is the end of the line." Carol picked up the document. Her eyes scanned the top page. It wasn't a bill. It was a copy of a property deed transfer, dated 6 months ago. "Silver Lake Hospitality Group," she read aloud, confusion wrinkling her forehead. "Sold to AV Holdings LLC." She looked up at me, the dots not connecting yet. "What is this? Who is AV Holdings?" "Abigail Vance," I said clearly. The silence this time was different. It wasn't awkward. It was the silence of a vacuum, the air sucked out of the room by the sheer magnitude of the shock. Preston's mouth fell open. "What?" "I bought the resort 6 months ago," I said, stepping closer to the fire so the light illuminated my face fully. "I bought the debt, I bought the land, and I bought the building. Every brick, every beam, every bottle of wine you've been drinking, I own it all." That's impossible," Carol stammered, stepping back, her heel catching on the stone. "You work in a motel, you're broke." "I'm a real estate investor specializing in distressed luxury assets," I corrected her. "I didn't tell you because I knew this is exactly what you would do. I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to see how you treated family when you thought no one powerful was watching." I pointed to the deed on the table. "You told me earlier that I should be grateful for the room I was given," I said. "You said I had no vision. Well, here is my vision, Aunt Carol. I don't tolerate thieves in my hotel." Carol's face crumbled. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a frantic, desperate panic. "Abigail, Abby, honey, this is a misunderstanding. I was joking earlier. You know our family sense of humor. I was just testing the staff to make sure they were treating us right." "You tried to get David fired because he couldn't uncork a bottle fast enough," I said coldly. "You called me a failure in front of the entire family, and you stole money from a single mother." I turned to the security guards. "Gentlemen," I said. The 2 guards stepped forward, their presence imposing. "Carol Vance and Preston Vance are no longer welcome on this property," I announced, my voice ringing out across the terrace. "They are to be escorted to their rooms to pack their belongings immediately. Verify that they do not remove any hotel property, robes, towels, toiletries. Everything stays." "You can't do this," Preston shouted, his voice cracking. "It's night. Where are we supposed to go?" I picked up the deed from the table and tapped it against my palms. I looked him in the eye and delivered the line I had been waiting all night to say. "Your stay is officially over. Checkout's in an hour." "Abigail, please," Carol wailed, grabbing at my arm. "We're family. You can't kick family out on the street. It's a 3-hour drive home." I pulled my arm away, brushing off her touch as if it were dirt. "You're right," I said. "Family doesn't treat family like garbage, which is why the rest of the family is staying." I turned to the cousins, who were watching in stunned awe. "Everyone else," I said, softening my voice, "I apologize for the disruption. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. The drinks are on the house. Mary, if you'll check your email, you'll see a full refund of the money you sent Carol. I've covered it." Mary brought a hand to her mouth, a sob escaping her. "Abby." "Mr. Henderson," I said, "please ensure Carol and Preston are off the premises by 10:00 p.m. If they are not, call the sheriff for trespassing." "With pleasure, Ms. Vance," Henderson said. Carol began to scream then. She screamed that I was an ungrateful brat, a snake, a liar. She screamed that she would sue me, that she would tell everyone in town what I had done. But as the security guards firmly took her by the elbows and guided her toward the door, her screams faded. Preston followed, head hung low, not daring to look anyone in the eye. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence returned to the terrace, but this time it wasn't tense, it was peaceful. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, the tension broke. Mark let out a low whistle. "Holy cow." Mary walked over to me and wrapped me in a hug so tight I thought my ribs might crack. She was crying, but they were tears of relief. Thank you, she whispered into my shoulder. Thank you, Abby. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was so scared about the money. I know, I said, hugging her back, feeling the last of my own adrenaline fade, leaving me exhausted but incredibly light. It's okay now. She can't hurt you anymore. I pulled back and looked at her. Also, I need you to pack your bags. Mary's face fell. Oh, are we? Do we have to leave too? I smiled, a genuine, warm smile. No, but I can't have my favorite cousins sleeping in a garden room. I'm moving you and the kids into the master chalet. The sheets are being changed right now. It has a hot tub on the deck. The kids will love it. Mary laughed, a wet, joyful sound. Abby, you don't have to. I insist, I said. Consider it a refund for years of bad reunions. The rest of the night was a blur of congratulations and questions. I ordered the good wine, the stuff from the private cellar, and we sat around the fire pit until past midnight. We talked about real things. Jobs, kids, dreams. Without Carol's suffocating presence, the family actually acted like a family. Around 1:00 a.m., I finally walked back inside. Mr. Henderson was at the desk, looking tired but satisfied. They're gone, I asked. Escorted off the property at 9:55 p.m., he reported. Carol tried to take the hairdryer. Security retrieved it. I laughed, I couldn't help it. It was so perfectly her. Good work, Robert. Take tomorrow off. Spend some time with your daughter. Thank you, Ms. Vance. I didn't go back to the basement. I took the elevator to the top floor, to the owner's penthouse, a space I had designed for myself but never actually slept in. I walked out onto the private balcony. The moon was high over Silver Lake, reflecting off the black water. I could see the taillights of a car far down the mountain road, winding its way back toward the city. They were gone, the toxicity, the judgment, the fear. It was all gone. I had spent my whole life trying to build a home, trying to build something solid that couldn't be taken away. I thought it was about bricks and mortar. I thought it was about deeds and contracts. But standing there, breathing the clean mountain air, I realized it wasn't just about owning the building. It was about owning myself. I took a sip of the water I had brought up with me. It tasted crisp. It tasted like victory. I was Abigail Vance. I was the owner of Silver Lake Lodge, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged.